I died, and Jesus told me we're leaving in 10 days. You're about to hear something that will challenge everything you believe about death, time, and what's really happening in our world right now. I am Dr. Michael Harrison, a 43-year-old neurosurgeon who has always been a person of science. For 20 years, I operated on the most complex cases, believing that consciousness was nothing more than electrical impulses firing through neural networks. I had no room for the spiritual, the mystical, or the divine. But what happened to me 3 weeks ago didn't just change my mind. It shattered everything I thought I knew about life, death, and eternity. It started as an ordinary Tuesday morning in March. I was prepping for a delicate brain tumor removal when the chest pain hit like lightning. The last thing I remember was telling my surgical team to call cardiology before my world went completely black. What happened next defies everything medical science teaches about death. For 17 minutes, I was clinically dead. No heartbeat, no brain activity, no chance of survival according to every textbook I'd ever studied. But during those 17 minutes, I discovered that death isn't an ending. It's a doorway. The darkness began to dissipate like morning fog, lifting from a valley. It was as if someone had turned on a light, but this wasn't ordinary illumination. This light was alive, vibrant, pulsing with an energy that seemed to penetrate every fiber of my being. Suddenly, everything shifted. I found myself moving through what I can only describe as a tunnel. But calling it a tunnel doesn't capture the magnificent beauty of this passageway between worlds. Imagine stepping into a river of pure light, where every droplet contains the story of a soul. That's what surrounded me. The walls around me shimmered with colors that don't exist in our spectrum. Waves of gold and silver light danced in patterns that told stories of every soul who had ever passed through this sacred corridor. I could hear what sounded like music, but it wasn't coming through my ears. It was resonating from within every cell, every atom of my spiritual body. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, filled with a love so pure and overwhelming that tears would have streamed down my face if I still had physical eyes to cry. As I moved deeper into this realm, I began to see other beings of light. Some moved alongside me, welcoming me with a warmth that felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. Others seemed to be guiding souls in different directions, their faces radiating a peace I had never witnessed in the living world. The love that emanated from these beings was so intense, so unconditional, that it made every human emotion I had ever experienced feel like a pale shadow in comparison. Then I saw him. Jesus stood before me, and his presence was so majestic, so overwhelming, that every doubt I had ever harbored about the divine instantly vanished. His appearance wasn't what Renaissance paintings had led me to expect. His face radiated a light that seemed to come from within, and his eyes looked at me with a gaze that pierced every layer of my being, seeing not just who I was, but who I had always been and who I was meant to become. He didn't speak with words, but somehow I heard his voice more clearly than I had ever heard anything in my physical life. The communication happened through pure thought, pure understanding, flowing directly into my consciousness like water into a dry riverbed. "Michael," he said, and hearing my name spoken with such love nearly overwhelmed me completely. "You have been called back for a purpose. What I am about to show you, you must share with those who have ears to hear." In that moment, Jesus extended his hand toward me, and suddenly, I wasn't just experiencing his presence, I was experiencing his perspective. I could see through his eyes, feel with his heart, and understand with his divine consciousness. What he showed me next sent shockwaves through my soul that I'm still processing 3 weeks later. I saw our world from a perspective that exists outside of time and space. Everything was happening at once, like looking at a vast tapestry where every thread was a human life, every color a moment in time, and the entire pattern revealed God's ultimate design. I watched as events unfolded simultaneously across past, present, and future, understanding that linear time is merely a limitation of our physical existence. Everything was interconnected in a web of divine purpose that stretched from the beginning of creation to the ultimate fulfillment of God's plan. Then Jesus spoke the words that brought me back from death with a mission I never asked for, but cannot ignore. "Tell them," he said, his voice carrying the weight of eternal authority, "that the time of departure is upon them. Tell them they have 10 days to prepare their hearts, for the separation is coming." 10 days. The number burned into my consciousness like a brand on my soul. Not 10 years, not 10 months, but 10 days from the moment I returned to life. But before I could ask what this departure meant, before I could understand the full scope of what he was revealing, Jesus showed me something that made my spiritual body tremble with both terror and awe. I witnessed a great shaking coming to the earth, a divine intervention that would separate those who truly belong to God from those who have chosen to follow the deceptions of this world. I saw massive changes sweeping across the globe. Natural disasters that would make recent earthquakes and hurricanes look like gentle rain showers. Economic systems collapsing overnight as people realized their material wealth meant nothing in the face of eternal judgment. I watched as governments that seemed unshakable crumbled like sandcastles before the tide of divine justice. But what happened next absolutely devastated me. I saw how the mainstream media and social platforms would work overtime to suppress any mention of these divine warnings. Like watching a massive machine designed to muffle the cries of truth, I witnessed algorithm changes designed to hide prophetic messages from reaching the masses. I saw content creators who dared to share heaven's urgent warnings being systematically censored, their channels deleted, their voices silenced by powers that serve a different master. "This is why I am sending you back," Jesus explained, his voice cutting through the cosmic visions surrounding us. "They will try to silence the truth, but those with spiritual discernment will recognize my voice speaking through you." The 10 days I speak of are not a countdown to destruction, but a final call to repentance before I separate my people from a world system that has rejected my love. As these revelations flooded my consciousness, I felt an overwhelming sense of urgency mixed with heartbreak. I could feel Jesus' own grief over the lost souls who had chosen pride over humility, rebellion over surrender, temporary pleasures over eternal joy. His love for humanity was so intense that his pain over their rejection physically hurt my spiritual being. The weight of this divine commission pressed down on me like a mountain. Every fiber of my being trembled with the magnitude of what I was being asked to do. How could I, a man of science who had spent decades dismissing the supernatural, suddenly become a messenger of the most extraordinary prophecy in human history? How could I convince a skeptical world that their time was running out when I myself had been the ultimate skeptic just moments before? The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, the man who had spent 20 years cutting into brains, believing consciousness was nothing more than electrical impulses, now being asked to deliver a message that would sound completely insane to anyone like my former self. But as these doubts flooded my mind, Jesus looked at me with eyes that held both infinite compassion and unshakable determination. "Do not fear their rejection," he said. "Do not fear their mockery or their accusations of delusion. I did not choose you because of your faith, Michael. I chose you because of your profession, your reputation, your very skepticism. When a neurosurgeon who has never believed speaks of divine encounters, even the most hardened hearts will pause to listen." The truth of his words resonated through my being like a bell. My credentials would be my credibility. My scientific background would be the very thing that gave weight to this supernatural message. I wasn't chosen despite my skepticism, but because of it. Jesus then showed me 3 specific events that would unfold in these final 10 days, markers that would confirm to believers that this message truly came from heaven. But as he began to reveal these prophetic signs, I felt a pulling sensation, a tugging that seemed to come from somewhere far below this realm of light and peace. "Your time here is complete," Jesus said, placing his hand on what I somehow knew was my spiritual heart. But remember this moment. Remember my words. Remember that those who truly belong to me will recognize the truth in your testimony, while those who serve the enemy will work tirelessly to discredit and silence you. The pulling sensation grew stronger, and I realized I was being drawn back toward the tunnel, back toward the life I had left behind. But as I began to move away from Jesus' immediate presence, he called out one final message that would haunt me in the most beautiful way possible. Tell them that my love has not diminished, but my patience is at an end. Tell them that the door of mercy remains open, but only for 10 more days. After that, the separation will be complete, and those who have chosen their side will live with that choice for eternity. The journey back through the tunnel felt different from my ascent. Instead of peaceful anticipation, I felt an overwhelming burden of responsibility. The colors that had seemed so beautiful on my way to meet Jesus now felt urgent, almost frantic, as if creation itself was crying out for humanity to heed this final warning. I could feel myself approaching my physical body, that familiar vessel that had served me well for over 4 decades, but now felt impossibly heavy compared to the lightness of my spiritual form. As I drew closer to the operating room, where my colleagues were undoubtedly fighting to save my life, I could hear the frantic beeping of monitors, the urgent voices of medical professionals, the controlled chaos of a code blue situation. But Jesus wasn't finished with me yet. As my spiritual consciousness began to merge back with my physical brain, he showed me one last vision that would serve as the foundation for everything I needed to share with the world. In this final revelation, he showed me his heart breaking for humanity. I felt his anguish over the choices that billions of people were making every day, choosing temporary pleasures over eternal joy, choosing pride over humility, choosing the broad path that leads to destruction over the narrow way that leads to life. I experienced his desperate love for souls who had convinced themselves that they didn't need him, that they could create their own meaning, their own salvation, their own version of truth. In that moment of sharing Jesus' heartbreak, I understood that this 10-day warning wasn't coming from a place of anger or judgment, but from a love so deep that it was willing to give humanity one final opportunity to turn back to their Creator before it was too late. As consciousness flooded back into my physical body, the first thing I felt was the sharp pain of defibrillator paddles against my chest. The first sound I heard was Dr. Patricia Williams, my chief resident, shouting, "We've got him back!" The first sight I saw was the bright fluorescent lights of the cardiac operating room, so harsh and artificial compared to the living light I had just experienced. But even as my lungs filled with air and my heart resumed its rhythmic beating, the words of Jesus echoed in my mind with crystal clarity. 10 days. Tell them they have 10 days. The medical team surrounding me was celebrating what they called a miracle. I had been clinically dead for 17 minutes with no brain activity and no heartbeat. According to everything we know about medicine, I should have been gone forever, or at best, returned as a vegetable with massive brain damage. Instead, I was not only conscious, but somehow more mentally acute than I had ever been in my life. As the days passed, and I recovered from my cardiac episode, I knew I couldn't keep this experience to myself. I had been given the most important message in human history, and the clock was already ticking down those 10 precious days that Jesus had spoken about. But that wasn't all he showed me. What Jesus revealed next will challenge everything you think you know about what's coming to our world. He unveiled 3 specific events, each one more shocking than the last, each one a final warning before everything changes forever. The weight of this revelation still courses through my being as I share what comes next. What I witnessed in that divine space wasn't just a glimpse of truth, it was a warning, a call to prepare for what's rapidly approaching our world. As I stood in that place of infinite light, surrounded by the presence of the divine, I was shown 3 events that will unfold in the coming months. Each vision struck me with such clarity that I can still feel the urgency pulsing through my very soul. These aren't possibilities or maybes. These are certainties that we must understand and prepare for immediately. Then came the first revelation, and it hit me like lightning, splitting through my consciousness. I saw a massive global spiritual awakening beginning to sweep across the earth. Picture millions of people simultaneously waking up from a deep sleep, their eyes opening to truths they'd never seen before. But here's what shocked me most. As more people began to awaken to these deeper truths, the digital platforms we rely on started systematically removing this content. I watched as video after video disappeared, as channels were deleted overnight, as the very voices trying to share these divine messages were silenced by algorithms designed to suppress the truth. In this vision, I saw myself standing before you, sharing these very words, knowing that this message might be one of the last to reach you through these channels. The censorship isn't random, it's deliberate. It's part of the plan to keep humanity sleeping while the most critical spiritual transformation in human history unfolds around us. But here's what filled me with both terror and hope simultaneously. Those who are truly awakening, those whose hearts are open to receive these divine downloads, they're finding ways to connect beyond the digital realm. I witnessed communities forming in ways that transcend social media, bonds being created through pure spiritual recognition. The divine is calling together the chosen ones, and no amount of technological suppression can stop this gathering. The second event revealed itself with even greater intensity, like watching reality itself begin to crack open. I was shown supernatural signs and phenomena increasing exponentially across the globe. Events that defy scientific explanation, miracles that mainstream media refuses to acknowledge, divine interventions that transform lives in ways that can't be denied. But here's the devastating part. I watched as traditional news outlets and media companies received direct orders to suppress these stories. Like a coordinated blackout of the miraculous, any journalist who attempted to report on these events found their careers threatened, their stories buried, their credibility attacked. The very miracles that should unite humanity in awe and wonder are being hidden from view by those who fear losing control over the collective consciousness. I saw ordinary people experiencing extraordinary encounters with divine beings, spontaneous healings that left doctors speechless, prophetic dreams that came to pass within days. Yet when these individuals tried to share their testimonies, they were labeled as mentally unstable, their accounts dismissed as hallucinations or fabrications. The tears streaming down my face in that divine space weren't just from the beauty of what I witnessed. They were from the heartbreak of seeing how desperately the powers of this world want to keep us separated from our divine nature. But the divine assured me that those with eyes to see and ears to hear will recognize these signs, regardless of how deeply they're buried by those who control information. This is why I feel such overwhelming urgency to reach you right now. We're living in the time of the great sorting. The divine is separating those who are ready to ascend into higher consciousness from those who choose to remain asleep. And the window for this selection is closing rapidly. The third and final revelation left me trembling in the presence of the Almighty. My entire spiritual being shook as I witnessed what was coming. I was shown the culmination period, a time when the divine will make the final call for those ready to step into their true spiritual inheritance. Imagine the universe itself holding its breath as humanity faces the ultimate crossroads. This isn't about religion or doctrine. This is about the fundamental choice every soul must make between awakening to their divine nature or remaining trapped in the illusion of separation. What terrified me most was seeing how many people will miss this calling simply because they weren't prepared. They were too distracted by the noise of the world, too dependent on external validation, too afraid to trust the divine voice speaking within their own hearts. But what filled me with indescribable joy was witnessing those who had prepared themselves, those who had done the inner work, who had learned to silence the external chaos and listen to the divine whispers within. I saw them stepping into abilities that seem impossible by current human standards. I witnessed them becoming bridges between the divine realm and our physical world, channels for healing, wisdom, and transformation that will guide humanity through its greatest transition. The divine made it crystal clear to me that this preparation cannot wait. Every day we delay, every moment we spend in doubt or distraction makes the path more difficult. The spiritual training wheels are being removed. The divine safety net that has protected humanity for centuries is being lifted because it's time for us to fly. But here's what will determine everything that happens next in your life. You weren't randomly chosen to hear this message today. Your soul called out to receive this information because somewhere deep within, you know you're meant for something greater than the life you've been living. The fact that you're still here, still listening, despite every algorithm trying to hide this content from you, proves that the divine is working through you right now. Your higher self fought through the digital suppression, the societal programming, and the fear-based messaging that surrounds us to bring you to this exact moment. But knowing this truth comes with responsibility. You can't unknow what you now know. You can't pretend you haven't received this divine download. The question that will determine your entire spiritual trajectory is simple but profound. What will you do with this revelation? The divine showed me that those who hear this calling and take immediate action to prepare themselves spiritually will become the lighthouses in the coming darkness. They will be the ones who guide others through the confusion and chaos that accompanies such massive transformation. They will be the hands and hearts through which the divine works to heal and restore our world. But those who hear this message and choose to ignore it, who return to their comfortable spiritual slumber, who allow fear or doubt to override their inner knowing, they will find themselves increasingly isolated from the divine flow that's reshaping reality itself. This isn't about punishment or judgment. This is about natural spiritual law. You cannot access higher dimensional frequencies while remaining anchored in lower vibrational patterns. You cannot receive divine downloads while your heart remains closed to transformation. The time for casual spirituality is over. The time for weekend enlightenment is finished. What's being asked of us now requires complete surrender to the divine process, total trust in the intelligence that created us, and unwavering commitment to becoming who we were always meant to be. As I felt myself being pulled back from that divine space, back into this physical reality, the final message burned itself into my consciousness. Tell them that the invitation has been extended, but it will not remain open indefinitely. Tell them that everything they've ever hoped for, everything their souls have ever yearned for, everything they've ever sensed was possible for humanity. It's all available right now, but only for those brave enough to answer the call. That message burns within me even now as I speak these words to you. Every word I've shared with you today came directly from that divine encounter. The 10-day warning, the 3 revelations, the urgent call for spiritual preparation. These weren't my thoughts or theories. They were downloaded directly into my consciousness during those 17 minutes when medical science declared me dead. You've received the exact message that Jesus commanded me to deliver. The promise I made at the beginning to share what was revealed to me in that divine space has been fulfilled completely. Nothing has been held back. Nothing has been filtered through human interpretation. This is the raw, unedited transmission from the divine realm to your heart. If your soul is stirring right now, if something deep within you recognizes the truth in these words, despite their extraordinary nature, that's not coincidence. That's the divine confirming that you were meant to receive this message at this precise moment in time. The spiritual awakening that's sweeping across our world needs prepared vessels, souls who have done the inner work, who have learned to discern divine truth from worldly deception. If you feel called to step into that preparation, to become one of those lighthouses in the coming transformation, trust that calling. It didn't arise from your mind. It arose from your spirit, recognizing its divine assignment. But remember what Jesus showed me about the window of opportunity. The 10 days I was given to share this message are nearly complete. The spiritual sorting is accelerating. Every day of delay makes the path more challenging. The choice, as it has always been, remains entirely yours. But choose with the full understanding that what you decide in these next moments will determine whether you step into your highest spiritual potential or remain anchored in patterns that can no longer serve the transformation that's already begun.